When the Diwata's life begins, it comes to consciousness in a dream world, where its ancestors raise it. Its parents are there, for they have already died. It spends the first 25 years of its life within this world, until it is finally born from the fruit of a tree.
I'm William Bosley, and I wanted to talk to you about the Diwata, an original playable race for 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. So originally the idea stemmed from a direct inspiration from an anime called The 12 Kingdoms. I really loved how the people in that anime were born from, they grew inside the fruit of a tree, and then they eventually were born to their parents. But I wanted a race that was sort of built all around that. So basically, the whole idea was originally spawned by that concept. But whenever I got into it, I started coming up with other ideas that sort of like grew it, because I also wanted them to be able to commune with their ancestors, and of course that directly flies in the face of the idea of being born from a tree. Basically, I figured that whenever the Diwata dies, this seed would contain their soul, maybe even while they're alive. Their soul is actually physically located inside the seed. Whenever they die and it grows into the tree, the soul lingers on inside the tree. And then anytime they want to grow a new Diwata, their soul goes in and they fragment their soul, and a piece of it is put into the fruit. So then that piece of the soul is grown into a full-grown Diwata, soul inside there. Inside that tree, there'd be like the sort of like dreamscape, like the Diwata afterlife. That's why you never see them in any other plane. Why you've played D&D for decades, and in every single plane you go to, every single afterlife you go to, you've never seen them there. Which means that every single Diwata has a bit of the soul of the previous Diwata, and then that soul has a bit of the soul of the previous Diwata, so it goes back in a linear path, which is perfect for a race being like just naturally capable of communing with all of their ancestors. So, of course, only in a straight line. Like, you couldn't commune with your uncle, because your uncle is not the tree that you were born in. So basically, those are the primary, flavor, like lore descriptions that I had. But then as I tried to, I originally designed this 4 years ago. And at the time I was trying to make my own RPG system, because I had not discovered 5th edition for myself yet. But whenever I actually transferred it over to 5th edition, I found that the same effects just need to be reworded, same like racial features sort of, need to be reworded. But then while I was rewording them, I realized that, well, first off, I'd given the races in my role-playing game a little bit more power, basically more features. So basically what I realized whenever I tried to transfer it over to 5th edition, was that I could either consolidate these powers and sort of make them, the flavor of this one is included in this one, but they're just this ability. But what I ended up discovering was that I realized that 5th edition has, races and sub-races. And some races don't have sub-races, obviously. But basically what I realized is that if I take, that kind of mechanic, and then I sort of do a little bit of a tweak to it, then what I can easily pull off is something along the lines of, taking the, allowing you to choose, like you choose a race that has a feature that during gameplay you're allowed to switch between the sub-races. And there's the reason, by the way, there's a specific reason this spawned. The idea was not just like inspired out of nowhere. It was like, basically, I realized that if they're going to die and grow into a tree, then there would be one single parent and then all of their greater ancestors. And so, for lots of children, one tree can bear many fruits. So the idea is that maybe a tree would live for, a couple thousand years. It might bear a couple hundred fruit over the course of that time. The Diwata themselves, I decided, were going to live for nearly 1,000 years. I went with 900 years. So basically the idea is that, they're like a tree. They can live an extremely long period of time. And there are reasons for that. First off is that they don't reproduce, sexually. There's just one parent. They turn into a tree that reproduces more Diwata. So they fully reproduce asexually. Essentially, I also realized that, okay, it's a tree. So how do I communicate that this race came from a tree? I don't just want it to be born and then it starts eating meat. And I certainly don't want it to be born and it starts eating leaves. But trees, they gather energy from, well, they gather water from the air and from the ground. And it's actually a surprisingly high amount of water gathered from the air. And most of a tree, just like humans, are made up of water. But basically, the sunlight hits the tree and it absorbs that, and that's how it does the, photosynthesis to make glucose and all that kind of stuff. So what I opted to go with was basically that they feed off the energy, and of course if you have like an anti-magic field, then they wouldn't be able to feed there. If you just have a dead space of magic, like where the weave is torn, then of course there's no energy there. And of course if you're not playing Forgotten Realms, if you're in something like Eberron, then I believe there is latent magical energies in Eberron and in other planes of existence as well. And in the same sense, I thought, well, if they can feed off the energy, maybe it would be cool if they can sort of interact with it in other ways too. So I thought maybe I'd give them the ability to sort of like sense vibrations in the magical energy. So whenever someone casts a spell, there's sort of like a wake, and like you can like pick up these like eddies in the water and in the magic. But basically, I thought it would be cool to it would be cool to see, I suppose. And they've got the third eye. So I gave them the ability to see magical energies in some way. But I thought, no, this is latent, low energy magic. You don't want to be blinded by this magic all the time to where it's, you can't see very far. So of course the race would never like evolve or develop or be created in any way to sort of need to see through a constant fog all around them, which is also what they feed on. So instead I was like, well, what if they can just feel it? And that gave me the idea. I thought about like, you're feeling wakes, it's like water, it's like waves. So I thought, well, aquatic life, have their fins allow them to, feel the motion of the water and feel flows and underwater currents and things like that. Even like ducks, for example, use their webbed toes to be able to like feel the flows of water and to know what's underneath them, and like even be able to tell if something's swimming past them. They can feel the water hitting their toes and stuff and the webbing. So I ended up giving them, obviously I'm not going to put it on their feet, I'm not going to do toes, so I gave them webbed hands. And so they've got these sort of like webbed fingers, and they can feel the waves of magic energy between them, flowing around them. Now that's something that is not from the classic, mythological Diwata, but it did create a visual difference that sort of separated it from, elves and other races that are basically just humans plus magic. And I figured that, if they're going to be so spiritual, so ancient, and, they're going to feed off of something like energy from the sunlight, then I thought, hey, why don't I make it to where they feed off of like sunlight and latent magical energies, or just, what, I thought about it and I was like, okay, too many times you'll be in the Underdark and things like that. I don't want the Diwata to just starve to death, so I cut out sunlight altogether and just said, okay, the Diwata can feed off of latent magical energies that's always around. In the case of, the Forgotten Realms, Faerun, and basically it's the weave. They feed off of the energy of the weave. And, of course, that's, in my opinion, super awesome, but for a playable race. So also, along the lines of it, there being asexual and then being gender fluid, sort of non-binary concept, I thought that maybe instead of having, multiple sexes, maybe instead what the Diwata would have is that they would have the ability to take on different natures, different, personality things that would actually change them physically and mentally in some way, and they could choose these things. So that's whenever the idea came along that you've got your race and you've got your subraces, and you can take on these other natures to, alter yourself. You gain these statistical bonuses, you gain a stat bonus, and you gain a feature or two, depending on which one you choose. I think they may have two. I think there's one that only has one. That's right. Yes, the Warden. It only has one feature, but it gets a stat bonus of +2 instead of +1. So it's sort of trade-off. That one gets Constitution instead of, because the Warden... anyway, I'll get to that in a second. The point is that the idea was that you... you've got these natures, you can assume these different natures, and then you can center yourself and sort of lose the nature and then gain a different nature instead. So to balance these, the Eladrin already can switch. They're a subrace all on their own. They're not, they're not a race with different subraces. They're a subrace of elf. And the Eladrin can already choose, their different seasons, and what that does is all it really changes is basically your damage type of your face step, which is like a special feature that's like Misty Step, but it deals damage. The Diwata individual subraces are natures are about equal to in power to that. Some of them have a little bit more versatility because they have two different features that are sometimes applicable to a situation. So basically. That's kind of how I built them around this concept of balancing them that way. And then in addition to that, while the Eladrin can change any long rest, they can just go, okay, I'm a different, I'm going to be summer, I'm going to be winter, whatever. The Diwata instead have to first center themselves during a long rest. Then they have to spend an entire day without any subrace benefits, their nature benefits. And then they can then meditate again and acquire a new one. Now, I didn't want them to be completely useless or completely just dumb whenever they don't have any of their natures. So they're the one thing that I had come up with already, the idea that they could sense vibrations in the weave or in the latent magical energy around them with their webbed fingers. I was like, well, they always have webbed fingers. All of their natures have webbed fingers. So maybe they're capable of just all the time they can pick up latent magical energies, the vibrations in the weave, and what that does is it allows them to know the exact location of a spell cast within a certain range. And to know its spell level, and also magic items that are used, and know its rarity. And then, so like if someone tries to sneak up on you and cast a spell at you, then you know not just that they're doing it, but exactly where they are. Now that range is really small, and there's a larger 60-foot radius where you just can't be surprised by spells. Now, I don't like that people can't be surprised, like barbarians can't be surprised all the time, and it's usually just like a blanket statement, can't be surprised, and it kind of ruins the DM's ability to pull out surprise. It's a really useful tactic. What I'm trying to say is that surprise is so unlimited all the time that I limited it. It's specifically spells. It has to be cast within 60 feet. And then that the Diwata is not surprised. Obviously, that's I feel limited enough. Usually, people don't open up with a spell. So they got that base ability. They got all these abilities with their different natures that they can take on, and the natures also serve cultural roles within their society. It's like it's like, okay, if I'm going to be someone who protects the grove, I take on the nature of the warden. I am going to travel around, maybe just outside their, the radius of the grove, make sure nothing's coming in. So I need to be able to benefit from surprise attacks, from people jumping me, from, enemies just coming out of nowhere. I need to be able to survive these attacks and be able to get back, and also be able to, call for help. Because you might be a small scout, you might be actually part of a large band, whatever. The point is that you need to be able to get reinforcements, and you need to survive until the reinforcements come. So that's Constitution, and a feature that helps protect them. And then the Diwata are very spiritual and very magical and very knowledgeable. And I've already pulled in this stuff with the weave, and they can sense latent magical energy, and they feed off of latent magical energy. So I made it to where one of the natures is all about research in the divine, magic, about even psionics, if you want there to be a psionic grove, or a single person who's psionic within a grove, a single Diwata that's psionic within a grove specifically. One of these things, they take on the nature of the inquirer. The nature of the inquirer is someone who does research and tries to study. By the way, the nature of the inquirer can sort of tap into their ancestors' ability to think, their ability to process information, their ability to know knowledge. It's almost like a psychic link where you're crowdsourcing the processing power of your research, so you're able to discover things more quickly. And then there's there are three more natures. There's the nature of the hunter is whenever survival of the grove, survival of the faction, survival of their town goes beyond their patience and wisdom. They need to take on the nature of the hunter. That's whenever they transform into someone that gains strength bonus and a feature that allows them to track things down very well, and they go out to the den of the monster itself, and they drag it out kicking and screaming and kill it on the spot. These are the ones that the wardens probably would come with them, but the hunter would lead the charge. There'd be probably several hunters within a small band of monster hunters, of wardens and hunters, and maybe even a wizard of some kind that goes along with them. There's also two more natures. There's the nature of the caretaker is another one that is very directly connected to the ancestors. They're able to benefit from their skills, their trade skills and other skills and things like that. The nature of the caretaker is someone who tends to the grove within their society, but whenever they leave their society and they go out to like human towns or elven towns or what have you, they sort of just, they take their vast knowledge and their ancestral information and they share that knowledge with other people. They like to teach people. They're naturally drawn toward the idea of taking care of people, both intellectually, spiritually, and potentially. If they have healing powers, they might be drawn toward the idea of curing people. So, you might have a cleric who decides to take on the nature of the caretaker during a time whenever, you're in a city under siege and there's a bunch of wounded soldiers and you're going to be under siege for like 3 weeks because you're waiting for reinforcements and the enemy's trying to starve you out. And during that time, soldiers are going to be being attacked by, catapult fire every now and then. They'll just start throwing catapults in, or they'll fire their arrows at the people on the wall, and you're just going to spend your time over the course of 3 weeks downtime. Part of your downtime is curing people with your magic spells. And so flavor-wise, you've taken on the nature of the caretaker. They don't necessarily have to be healers, though. They're more like parental roles or guides, or the Legends of Diwata. This is where the Legends of Diwata, after I named it Diwata, started to reinform the original design, because the Diwata in their mythology usually live on the fringes of society. There's someone you go to for wisdom and guidance. There's someone you go to for maybe an incantation or whatever, I believe, and that's sort of you need help from them. It's sort of like the analog to the witch at the edge of the society. So the fifth nature is the one of the pilgrim. That's the people who travel between the groves to maintain communication and to maintain to trade information between the groves. They're also diplomats. They go to human towns. They go to dwarf towns. They go to elven towns, and they communicate between them. They're the ones who would go there and be the diplomat who says, hey, we see you're in trouble. We're hidden away. We want to send out a small regiment of wardens and hunters and a powerful wizard or two, or maybe a cleric, and we're going to send them into your town to help protect you. They take on these different natures, and then they feed on latent magical energies, but here's the catch. It sounds like, oh, this versatility is really powerful. It sounds like all this kind of stuff. I tried to balance them as is, like this. Now, there's an additional feature on the main Diwata that is a little bit unusual, and that is they can take on one more nature. I thought of the idea that what if the Diwata feeds on latent magical energy that is corrupted, like evil energy from a lower plane, or perhaps the light magical energy inside the lab of some evil, wizard, like some evil necromancer or a lich or something. It can trigger a sort of like subconscious, reaction to transform instantly into a sixth nature that otherwise they are not allowed to choose. Now, another thing about this, by the way, is that it can also happen whenever they're struck by a concentrated negative energy, and that originally was left vague, and I left that version of it, the vague version, in that as a variant rule, but I reworded it because it was just too vague, and only some DMs are going to be able to actually think about how to implement the vague concept. So I left it in there for you if you want. So some DMs, I imagine, are just going to say, yeah, I'm not doing that. It's too complicated. I'm going to go with the rewritten version where it's about taking necrotic damage specifically, or when they feed during a long rest off of the latent magical energies around them. It takes 6 hours. It's a meditative thing. And if the energy in the area that they choose to camp in is evil, like they decide to sleep in the lab of an evil necromancer, or they go to the negative plane like the Nine Hells and attempt to camp there overnight, then there is a chance they will take on this form. It's a dice roll, so you will get to choose to risk it, or what you can do is you can actually, if you're a player playing as them, you can center yourself. If you lose your nature and you're centered, if you remain centered, then you never transform into this, into the sixth nature, the nature of the beast. Whenever you're forced to transform, basically what happens is that you go on a rampage similar to the Berserker Axe. Their jaw rips open their flesh and teeth come out, and impossibly curled teeth that defy the shape of the normal Diwata's mouth, so implying that perhaps the formation of this mouth is spiritual in nature and not physical. You grow claws, you grow horns, and you go on a rampage killing whatever is closest to you. That's whenever you're forced to go into the nature of the beast. It's like your body, because you're not the god, you're the descendant of the god, you're connected to the god. You lose control, and because your body freaks out and it starts just rampaging and killing everything around it. Now, the thing about that is that you can also choose to take on the nature of the beast under a specific circumstance. And this is where this is where the nature of the beast comes in, where you're like, oh, okay, so this is why it exists. And the negative energy or the necrotic damage, that just triggers it. That just forces you into it and makes you accidentally do it on people that don't deserve it and go wild all over the place. No, the reason it exists is because whenever you see another player, an ally, actually, like any kind of creature you consider a friendly creature or an ally, die, then your grief, you can focus on your grief and choose to take on the nature of the beast. If you do, then you pull, your claws come out, your horns come out, but you don't go on a rampage and kill anyone around you. You go on a rampage targeting the person who killed your ally. So if you're fighting the big bad and they kill an ally, you could go, okay. Let's say, your claws and horns are natural weapons and you have to use them while you're in the nature of the beast. So for whatever reason, they are more useful to you than your current equipment, your current weapons. Maybe you're out of spell slots. Maybe you're a warlock with only 2 spell slots. You've used them in this battle already. You went boom, boom, because you knew that if your ally died, and you knew this battle was going to be hard, so someone may die and very likely would die, then you could take on the nature of the beast. The nature of the beast allows you to make a few additional attacks. The natural weapons are a set strength, so you can't use, and you drop whatever other weapons you have. So if you have some magic weapons that do extra special stuff, you're losing that by turning into the nature of the beast, but at the same time, you're trading that off for the ability to make an additional attack. Whenever you hit with your horns, you get to make an additional attack with your claws as part of that action. So basically, you can rampage, you can make all these attacks over and over again. They have specific set powers. They don't get stronger as you go, except for that eventually they're considered magic weapons after 10th level. It's really about divine wrath, really, by the way. I call it the nature of the beast because you look bestial because you get this wrath, this just go after them and slaughter them. Now, I built it modular. There's another facet to this I'm about to get to, but I built this modular so that if you absolutely hate the entire concept of the nature of the beast, it's built into 2 features that the main class gets. One feature that allows you to, it mentions that you can't turn into the nature of the beast as part of the feature that lets you change natures. It allows you to change just between the 5. And then there's another feature that is the one that forces you to transform or allows you to transform by choice. Basically, that feature, if you hate it, if you're the DM and you hate it, and you say, look, you can play as the Diwata, but listen, I hate this. I think this is a terrible idea. Then you can take that out. You can just drop that. Now, by the way, back to that variant rule is that, just to be clear, the reason you would want to do the variant rule, it seems like, negative energy, that's necrotic damage. When will I cast a spell that's negative energy that's not necrotic damage? I guess I might make a spell that does poison damage, and maybe that's negative energy. But no, the key here is that whenever you're hit by a spell in the variant version, you're forced to transform if it is negative energy. If there's negative magical energy hitting you, then you are transform. And that includes if someone casts something like mind control from a particularly evil source, like if it's an evil god or an evil entity like Vecna or something like that. If they try to mind control you, then you are being hit by a negative energy spell, and therefore you also have to change. There's no necrotic damage dealt. That's why the variant rule exists. That's why I left the variant rule in there as a thing, is because it expands what can transform you. But it also, what it does is, it's the DC is now 8 plus the level of the spell. So if the spell is cast at 3rd level, then it's only a DC of 11. So a lot of those effects, you're going to be rolling a lot more for your necrotic, for your chance to transform. But the DC is generally going to be lower. I mean, the highest it can go at that point is 17, is DC 17. And with necrotic damage, I actually capped it at 15, DC 15. So technically the spells can go higher overall. But that's like power word kill, which also does not deal necrotic damage. But I feel like, as the, if it fails, you're still targeted by negative energy, you have to make a save. You've been hit by the negative energy. The variant rule is in there for those who can remember when to make it come up, and who want to do a little bit of fiddly determining what it constitutes as negative energy. A lot of descriptions of spells will be like, this like, dark gray mist, or this like blackened mist, or, some kind of effect like that comes out, and you could just be like, that description it just sounds negative. Whatever that is, it sounds dark and ominous and negative. So you can rule that's a negative spell. You can cut out this entire nature. If you do not want to do the nature of the beast at all, you can cut it out. You could keep the Divine Wrath one. Your DM might say, well, I like the idea of preventing TPKs by letting one player who's playing the Diwata become beast mode and just go crazy on the enemies. I like that idea. It'll prevent TPKs and downward spirals. One player died, and you witnessed it. They already died. That's done. The drama of death is present. But we can avoid TPKs if we cut out the nature of the beast that goes crazy, and we keep the Divine Wrath one, and then that will help us go, beast mode, take them down. As long as the Diwata is not the one who died. So they're very spiritual. They've got multiple ways that they're super spiritual. And in D&D terms, that means, divine magic rather than just sorcery. But also, the weave is created by a god. So, it's part of a god. So I felt like, you're interacting with the powers of a deity in a way that other mortals can't manage to pull off. And technically, you're not even mortal. I mean, your soul lives on in your tree. Your soul lives on to where if your tree gets chopped down, and your children, they still have pieces of your soul or part of your soul. So you're still there. And maybe you exist sort of, there's a lot of stuff going on there. And I also thought that, if the Diwata are like gods, then I went back, to incorporate this concept. Whenever I took it from the 4-year-old design that was, a long time ago, and I decided I was going to put it into 5th edition, I thought, okay, well, if this is going to go into 5th edition, then I need to work it into their lore. But basically, these are technically built for Forgotten Realms. You can adapt this lore to pretty much any world. Just take out the names of the specific gods that are involved. The idea is that the Diwata may have been a god. They don't know anymore. The memories, as you go further and further back in generations, get more and more vague. And they all, though, possess one specific, very, almost lucid, but somewhat still vague, like a dream. Almost like a lucid dream of events happening to their original ancestor, the one that birthed all of the Diwata as a species. And essentially what it is they were some kind of celestial entity that was present in this vast, empty darkness, where the only things around them were the gods, Ao and Shar and Selune, and Mistra was there. And so whenever this memory occurred, and basically they climbed into the world, sort of like climbing into bed. They were weary. They were a god that was weary. They climbed into the world like climbing into bed, and they pulled the weave over themselves like a blanket. And the idea is you could play with this lore, this memory in a number of ways. And they've been hiding since this occurred, since their inception into the world, because obviously back then I believe they were like aboleths going to war or something. I'm not entirely certain, but there was a huge major conflict, and they would want to stay safe, so they would probably be out in the world somewhere, or they'd be scattered everywhere, and they'd be better at hiding than elves, better at hiding than Furbolg, clearly, because you've never heard of them before. You've never played a D&D campaign that had them before. So they must be the pinnacle of the races that are capable of just hiding in seclusion. And that would probably come back to the fact that they feed on latent magical energy. They don't have to worry about, going out and hunting. They don't have to worry about crop rotation. So, their civilizations are very tight. Their structures built around their groves. They may even be built into like underground, under the roots of their birthing trees. Their birthing trees can exist, not just, if the Diwata, live off of late magical energies and not off of sunlight, then their trees theoretically could as well. So, you might find a grove of them in the Underdark, just completely, lost to time. No, they're beyond even communication with other Diwata at that point, because they've been locked down there for so long, and the Underdark is so dangerous. There's no way they could escape. There's like probably legends that they exist down there. They basically, each grove has their own theory about how, what that memory says, what it's depicting, and what happened with their ancient ancestor, and even what and who they were. They don't have a name anymore. Maybe the name was Diwata. They're not sure anymore. They sort of refer to that ancient ancestor as Diwata. Potentially. You can change it in your own game if you want. But basically the idea was that there are multiple theories. One is that there was Shar, Selûne, and Diwata. And Diwata was was basically a third sibling. Genderless, because they became asexual whenever they entered the world. I figure that must be in their base nature. They must have no sex, no gender, as a base nature. The Diwata themselves are sort of like, gender fluid or non-binary by nature, generally. Basically, the idea, though, is that there were these three gods. And whenever they created Mistra, that all happened. And something involved in that, which has been lost to time. No one remembers what happened between these gods at this moment, because this god sort of disappeared from the pantheon whenever they stepped into the world and became Diwata. So, but something happened that caused Diwata to become exhausted. And so the Diwata god, stepped into the world, was the first Diwata, and whenever they died, their tree is probably a much more prominent tree. It may have been destroyed by now in your world. There are other theories that Diwata have. Some of them say, by the way, it was a sibling of Shar and Selûne, a child of Eo. But others say it was actually a god that was a child of Mistral. Whenever she created and that the weave itself is actually like a baby blanket for this god. This god is actually not just tired, it was young. It was weak and young because it was birthed from Mistral, who is like a strange byproduct of damage to another god, and maybe her offspring are slightly weakened because of it. And so it was a full-blown god that was just weak and needed to rest at the beginning of its life, life as a god, before it could return back up to the celestial, planes. So that's one idea. I also had some other ideas, though, that maybe it's like if you don't want to throw in extra gods, if you don't want to give them some kind of deity, if you don't want to sort of make it a really cool story that leads to that, and instead you want to go in a different direction, you could say, for example, that it was an archangel. You could say that it was the first archangel ever made, and that they basically, whenever they were born, whenever they're created, they were superior to other archangels, nearly a god, like a demigod sort of thing, and that the other archangels, it was like the Diwata served as sort of like a prototype for other archangels, maybe because they found that something went wrong, or something, like maybe they were a deity that didn't have all of the powers of a deity, and like they were draining energy or something, and they needed to go rest, or something like that. But or maybe something happened to them. But then all the other archangels were made because they realized that they needed someone that was just a servant to the gods, and they couldn't just go creating demigods. So basically the idea is that maybe they're celestial entities of some kind. But then the final idea I had was that maybe they are celestial entity like an archangel, or maybe a god themselves, who is in command during the Blood War, who was fighting the demons alongside what became the devils, the original archangels and things like that became the devils. And so this god was fighting in the Blood War for so long, that's where they became weary. That's where they became damaged or something, like injured, and they needed to rest. It's possible. Again, it was an archangel right alongside, we'll probably just put up the name. The point is that I can't remember the name right now. It starts with an A, I think. But they basically maybe that they weren't in command. Maybe this Diwata was another archangel that was actually in command, or maybe the Diwata was a god that was in command during the Blood War, and that whenever the deal was struck to bring all of the evil dead out of the other afterlives down into the nine hells to be tortured, and then also to supply power to the devils. That's whenever the Diwata was like either already injured, or maybe they just decided, I do not like this contract. I don't want to have anything to do with this. I am too holy for this. I reject this concept. And so they said, can I just return to the heavens? And maybe at that point it's like, okay, to purify yourself, you have to go into the prime material plane and become mortal for a time. Repent, your descendants will purify yourself, and over time you will purify yourself and become worthy of being in the upper planes again. And maybe that's why the weave is there. Maybe in this case it's not a blanket, like maybe it's a washcloth, maybe this is how you're purifying yourself. Maybe this is how the Diwata is going to purify itself over time, because it's been corrupted by the demons. Another idea is that they are resting. Maybe they are only resting until the day that the Blood War comes to a head and the demons start rushing into the prime material plane and all hell breaks loose. And at that point, the Diwata is waiting. The Diwata, the entire race, are waiting for this chance. They may not know they're waiting. Maybe at that moment, sort of their god will reawaken inside of them, an ancestral voice talking directly to them, like a cleric being contacted by a god, or an Aasimar being contacted by their diva. Just suddenly, they're able to speak non-stop directly to this deity that's telling them, you need to move, you need to fight the Blood War, you need to fight the demons. It would be a really cool campaign, which I am working on that kind of possibility. But in the meantime, you can run your own thing along those lines. Basically, yeah, the idea is that your character was, alongside Asmodeus. Asmodeus is the name of that. Not his original name. Whenever he was an archangel, I think he had a different name, and then he became Asmodeus, or maybe he did. Maybe he was just I don't remember. Anyway, the point is that that's the idea of their origin, and that sort of informs everything about them. Now that I've sort of adapted to 5th edition, there's like all these ideas that came out. And if you're a DM out there watching this video, then yes, these are all ideas. Use one of them or make your own. You know the drill. You're a DM. By the way, the supplement comes with the Diwata as a playable race. It comes with spells. A spell. It comes with one spell that I created called Identify Caster. It allows you to sort of identify who cast a spell in an area. It backtracks 8 hours. I don't want to ruin any like mystery campaigns. I know it still could with 8 hours, so if you want to, I have very alternate, spells to put in there. The reason I have the spell in there is because the nature of the Inquirer gets it. They can cast it once a day. So, and it doesn't come up very often that you'd actually want to use it, so they have another feature that's useful like all the time, but less powerful. Not a full-blown first-level spell that you get for free. So basically, the idea is like 8 hours prior, up to 8 hours prior. If a spell was cast within 8 hours and you know what the spell is and it was cast within range, you actually detect a stain on the latent magical energies around you, or a stain on the weave in the case of Forgotten Realms and some other worlds. The stain is there, and it's sort of like visible to you. You can sort of, whenever you cast a spell, you can see it, and you can actually, it's unique to the caster. So you can actually identify who the caster is if you know that caster's unique like fingerprint. It's like finding the fingerprint. You can think of it as like dusting for spell fingerprints, magical fingerprints. And so it actually can help mystery campaigns, because it would give you this idea of like, oh no, yeah, I'm like a Sherlock character. But again, it takes it takes a long rest to lose a nature, and it takes a long rest again after that to gain a nature. So in the case of the Diwata getting it for free, if they're not already the nature of the Inquirer, if they're not already wanting to play a character who is super inquisitive and super, like a sleuth kind of character, or just any other kind of highly intelligent character, but also you have to know whose fingerprint that is. You've got the stain. You know the pattern of the stain, and it's unique to that spellcaster how they affect the weave, and they leave behind this mark. You find that spell. You find who you think a suspect is, and you trick them into casting a spell. And then you cast the Identify Caster again, and you see the same mark. Then you know who it was. And also, by the way, if you know who it is, then you get an extra bonus. You can see what they were. You can see the moment they cast it. It's like a freeze frame image, this sort of like astral projection that only you can see of the Voldemort casting of Avada Kedavra. You know what I mean? Like whatever it is, you can see them. This shape standing where they were standing, casting it, looking where they were looking, and all that kind of thing, which can also help, but only if you know whose fingerprint it is. If you already know whose fingerprint it is, it sort of like takes a more concrete form, and you're able to identify more directly what they were doing at that very moment, which means you could potentially also figure out if it was in self-defense or if it was a murder or what have you. It actually helps, in my opinion, the right campaigns. Obviously, sometimes it still will break it. It's like, well, you'll just find out who the murderer is within an hour. You're in the other room. It's Clue. You're in the other room. The murder happens. You run into the parlor, and they're dead. And you decide to cast Identify Caster, and now you've solved the entire mystery. One shot solved. Everything's over. Everyone goes home now. It's that's the kind of thing that it could ruin. So in those events, that's what the replacements are. The replacements, by the way, are either Detect Magic or Speak with Dead. Your choice. They speak with their ancestors already, so Speak with Dead as an ability to be Inquirer, is my choice. I say that, and I would limit it to 24 hours, as it says in the supplement. But the other one is that you would want to cast potentially Detect Magic. So you can replace Identify Caster with Detect Magic because that's similar, or Speak with Dead because that's flavorful for the Diwata. It fits the Diwata. The character, by the way, stat blocks, there's 3 of them. There's a Warden, there's a Hunter, and there's a Beast. The Warden and the Hunter can also transform into the nature of the Beast. But you as the DM can choose to not do that. I gave them the reaction that does it the ability to transform according to their, seeing an ally die. And then they can also be forcibly transformed, just like the allies, or just like the players. So you can put Diwata in as allies, and make them, and make an interesting encounter where a Diwata NPC transforms and the players have to kill them or try to find a way to peaceably neutralize them. Or you can, make it to where it's an enemy and the enemies are, that's the thing is, I did some calculation with a CR calculator online and came to find that, the Warden and the Hunter are CR2, the Beast is CR5, and it is more powerful because that's how I got to CR5 with the calculator. Basically, whenever I went onto that website to try and calculate what an actual encounter involving these were for, it came out saying that basically if I had 2 of these, or if I had like 2 Wardens and 1 Hunter, it came out to CR7. And then if one of the Wardens died, and so either the Hunter or the Warden transformed because they're both CR2, into a Nature of the Beast. One of them transformed into Nature of the Beast, but not the other, just one of them. Then then the CR, even though someone died, so the number of enemies went down, so the CR level from then on in the battle should have gone down. Well, because they turned into the Nature of the Beast, that's the thing. It went back up. It actually went higher than it was. It was CR7. It went to CR8 because there's a CR5 monster replacing a CR2. And then the one that died was a CR2 and went away, so it actually bloop bloop and went higher. So take that what you will, use them or don't use them. I think it'll make a really interesting encounter that nothing else I'm pretty sure in the game does. I mean, summoning creatures does similar effect, but it doesn't do the same effect. So, and wraiths kill your allies and turn them into enemies, so that also does a similar effect, but not the same effect. So this is an encounter that you could also curate a bit. You could force. I didn't put in there that they have to make a check whenever they see an ally die, just like I didn't make the player make a check. But if you as a DM are like, I want to see if they even were like paying attention whenever it happened, or if this particular character really cared about that other character all that much, maybe they were rivals, maybe they didn't like each other, then I'm going to roll a d20, and if it's above a certain number, then they did like them enough that they're filled with sorrow and they will transform. And so basically you're making a check on it, but it's not really a check to transform. It's a check to see if they would want to transform, and they're free to transform whenever they want when they witness an ally die. So yeah, that's up to you as the DM. But essentially you can sort of curate the encounter so that some transform and maybe some don't, to balance it a bit. But it does make really cool encounters. I think that would be a really cool concept for an encounter, is the whole idea is watching this thing happen. But anyway, yeah, I think I've pretty much covered all the topics of the entire supplement. Honestly, you could probably, with this amount of information, with this long of a video, you could probably build these things yourself. But I already did that. And so you can go get the supplement if you're interested. I assume by now you're someone who wants to buy it. If you're at this point in the video, unless you skipped ahead, if you're at this point in the video and you watch the whole thing, then you're probably in the mood to buy it. So yeah, I would very much appreciate the support. I intend to make additional supplements. I intend to make additional, videos. I want to make videos that aren't related to supplements. This is kind of like an advertisement for the supplement. I already made one, but it was in response to someone else's video, Matt Colville, and it was just supposed to be like a supplement to his, not really a response, more like a supplement. It was a little bit of extra info that I wanted to give to new DMs, that I think he briefly mentioned. Anyway, the point is that, I want to make those kinds of videos too. And make a real channel, a real YouTube channel, where I also talk about my, supplements that I release, because I feel like the supplements on YouTube, on DM's Guild, a lot of them are really good and no one knows they exist. And even if they did know they exist and they bought it, they may buy it and never touch it because they don't know how to use it. And so by making a YouTube video like this one, I'm giving you all of this stuff, all this extra flavor, all this passion about it too. My passion for the project. I really liked this thing. Like I said, I came maybe 4 years ago, and then I decided to make it into a D&D thing now. I wouldn't have remembered a freaking playable race for 4 years and then decided to make it into D&D 5th edition as the first supplement I release if I didn't really like this thing. So I really like these Diwata. I really like the mythology of the original Diwata, and it's amazing, and I very much respect it. It's so amazing. But they're so cool. But basically the idea, I wouldn't even do the Diwata first if I didn't think they were good. So if you like them and you go buy it, if you just want to support the channel, that's the thing. Like Matt Colville, for example, he supports his channel he makes novels. I'm also writing novels, but I am not published, nothing like that. But there's no way to support me in that direction. But if you, he asks people to support him by buying his novels, because then you get something in response. If you like the sound of this race, support me by buying the supplement. There we go. Problem solved. So the point is that, if you can help, that would be great. And I hope you enjoyed. Diwata Revealed is, by the way, I don't know if I even said that yet. Diwata Revealed is the name of the supplement. Thank you. See you next time.